Hello ladies and gentlemen, dear subscribers, welcome to a new video on my channel. Grandpa Plays overspielt the name of the channel, but today I will not talk about games or something like that, because I want to talk about the virus that is with us presently. Zu Beginn möchte ich darauf hinweisen, dass das deutsche Originalvideo in der Videobeschreibung verlinkt ist. One note may be allowed in the beginning. Since the video is getting quite long, I will offer links to the individual sub-chapters in the video description. If you only want to see special parts of the video, you can use them. In December 2019, Chinese doctors in the metropolis of Wuhan became aware of a new type of pneumonia. Initially, local authorities ignored the disease and cautioned doctors who had shared information about the disease on the internet and local forums. Then, however, this illness could not longer be ignored, which continued to spread. Cities and countries were locked down. However, the worldwide spread could not be prevented. This was partly due to the properties of the virus and partly due to the sometimes sluggish and wrong decisions by governments. In this somewhat longer video, I want to deal with everything related to this new disease. I will first outline the basic properties of viruses. I will explain what viruses are, how they spread, how destructive and contagious viruses are, what are exponential spread, doubling time, and infectivity, what is herd immunity. I want to show how differently governments reacted to the virus and what measures the World Health Organization, WHO, has taken. I will explain how to develop tests, medication, and vaccines. I will discuss when we have overcome the danger. Some people say the virus doesn't exist. It was a government fake to curtail people's fundamental rights. It will later be given a weight by me to distinguish whether the virus actually exists or is just a fake. First of all, we have to talk about viruses in general. The living beings on Earth are divided into different realms. On the one hand, there are the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the kingdom of fungi, the kingdom of bacteria. These are roughly the realms that come to mind straight away. Science divides differently, though. It divides life into bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. Archaea are unicellular organisms like bacteria, but differ in important points from those. Eukaryotes have a real cell nucleus and a complicated internal structure of the cell. This includes all other living things, such as animals, plants, fungi, algae, and others. An important property of living things is that they can reproduce. It does not matter whether this reproduction takes place through cell division, such as with bacteria, whether the reproduction takes place through sprouting, as with some plants and fungi, whether the living organisms reproduce sexually, in which male and female reproductive cells unite to form a new living being, or whether it happens through mixed forms. Living things can always reproduce on their own. Viruses are something else. They cannot multiply themselves, so strictly speaking they are not living things. Viruses spread in a completely different way. They need other cells to spread. There is an infinite number of viruses on Earth. They have adapted to all kinds of living things. There are viruses that infect bacteria, others infect plants, and others infect animals. When reproducing, they always use the same method. If a virus hits a cell to which it is adapted, it docks onto the cell with certain molecules on its surface. A hole is then cut into the cell membrane with the help of other molecules. The virus infiltrates its contents and thus its genetic material into the cell. With the help of additional molecules, the cell is forced to produce the genetic information of the virus. It also creates the virus envelopes and the other molecules that the virus needs to attach itself to new cells and enslave them. After all the cell is full of new viruses, the cell dies and a large number of viruses are released into the environment. Since viruses destroy their host cells, they are harmful to these cells. Unicellular organisms are destroyed by the viruses. Multicellular organisms such as plants or animals become sick when the viruses attack their cells. While bacteria already were described in 1676 by Antony van Leeuwenhoek, who discovered them with the help of a self-made microscopes, viruses were discovered much later. The reason is that most viruses are too small to be seen in light microscopes. Around 1890 it was discovered that the mosaic disease of tobacco plants can also be transferred to healthy ones with an extract from sick plants without bacteria being in this extract. The tobacco mosaic virus was not discovered until 1935. This tobacco disease can also affect other plants, however no animals, because the structures of animals and plants are very different. If pathogens that attack one type of living pass to another species, it is called a zoonosis. Such zoonoses have been around for a long time. This is not only known for viruses. Viruses that pass from animals to humans are usually not problematic. The animal viruses lack the tools to penetrate into a human cell. However, viruses can accidentally get these tools through mutations. Viruses can also exchange genetic components with each other. So, if a person is ill with a virus, for example having a harmless runny nose, and then viruses of an animal origin happen to be in the human body at the same time, then both viruses can exchange their genetic information. Then a new virus may arise, for which the human immune system is not prepared. But it is also not certain whether the new virus can survive in humans, whether it can subsequently spread, and much more. Luckily, this happens very rarely. The closer and denser people or pets or wild animals live together, the more likely such zoonoses are. I live here in my apartment without pets, and I am therefore safe from such surprises. But people who have pets at home, handle livestock, breed or trade with them, people who hunt wild animals and eat the meat are more at risk. The closer the animals are related to humans, the more likely a zoonosis will be successful. It is therefore much more likely that viruses will pass from mammals to humans than that we get viruses from lizards or fish. Coronaviruses are a family of viruses. There are numerous species in these. 7 of these can also affect humans. Human coronavirus 229E. This virus triggers colds. Human coronavirus NL63. This was identified first in the Netherlands in 2004 in a baby. However, the virus is widespread worldwide and has been circulating in humans for hundreds of years. The latter 2 viruses are related and separated around 1000 years ago. Human coronavirus OC43. This virus consists of 4 subspecies that separated in the 1980s and 90s. One of these subspecies was only discovered in 2006. Human coronavirus HKU1. This virus was first discovered in Hong Kong in 2005, but it is widespread worldwide and originated earlier. It has jumped from mice to humans. MERS-CoV. It was discovered in 2012 in London from patients from Saudi Arabia. It has jumped from bats via camels to humans. SARS-CoV-1. The SARS virus first appeared in Guangdong, China in November 2002. It probably jumped from bats via civets to humans. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus of the current pandemic, Covid-19. The origin of the current virus has not yet been unequivocally clarified. Bats are likely to play a major role here again. Another intermediate host may be pangolins. There are allegations that the virus was created by humans. Either American agents are said to have exposed the virus in Wuhan, or the Chinese have failed a laboratory experiment and the virus has been released into the environment. These theses have since been referred to the realm of tales by both American scientists and German virologists. A national process has to be assumed. Of course, humans are to some extent guilty because they inadvertently created opportunities for the virus to develop. With the help of genetic analysis, the relationship between living things can be determined. For example, the paternity of a man can be determined very precisely with a genetic analysis. The same works for viruses. The Nextstrain.org site publishes gene analysis of COVID-19 samples among other viruses. The relationship between the individual samples can be determined from the number of mutations. It can be seen from the figures that the common ancestor of all virus samples must have existed in earlier December 2019. So the first infection of a person, the zoonoses, must have taken place earlier. A period at the end of November 2019 is probably realistic. Some publications in recent times even assume an even earlier initial infection, which should have led to more frequent pneumonia in Europe as early as December. The incubation period is a time between infection and illness. According to the RKI, Robert-Koch-Institut, it is 1 to 10 days, with the most common value between 5 and 6 days. The infectivity already starts before the patient shows symptoms. According to the RKI, infectivity begins up 2 days earlier than the symptoms. The highest infectivity is on the day before the onset of symptoms. This fact makes COVID-19 difficult to contain. Public fever measurement at the airport therefore does not necessarily work properly. If you feel sick and have attended carnival session in the day before, most of the other guests may already be infected. This differs COVID-19 from SARS, in which infection of others was only possible after the onset of symptoms. That is why SARS was contained relatively well. This containment is difficult with COVID-19. A COVID-19 patient infects about 3 people. This is a famous basic reproduction number, R0. This number differs from virus to virus. For measles, for example, it is 12 to 18, which is the highest value of all viruses. The rate of the very fatal MERS disease, which is also caused by a coronavirus, is well below 1, which means that MERS can hardly spread. The infection rate is, of course, only an average figure. A COVID-19 patient infects about 3 people on average. Of course, there is some variation. There are sick people who do not infect anyone because they have no close contact with other people in their highly infectious period. On the other hand, there are people who have attended events such as carnival meetings or popular festivals when they were highly infectious. These are the so-called superspreaders. The variability in the infection rate is described by the dispersion factor. If it is 1, all people infect others equally. If it is close to 0, then there are very large differences and very few superspreaders. Fighting a viral disease is easier when there are few superspreaders and you can identify most of these people's contacts. Fortunately, the dispersion factor of COVID-19 is closer to 0 than to 1. The mortality rate is highly dependent on age. While it is well below 1% in children and adolescents, it rises to maybe 5% in 60 or 70-year-olds and maybe 20% in 80-year-olds. Of course, also children die. The headline, "Even a 13-year-old died from COVID," is actually no sensation because a mortality rate of 0.1%, 1 in 1,000 children, statistically dies. However, 200 out of 1,000 people die in 80-year-olds, which is of course a completely different story. There are also discussions about whether people should be counted differently if they died of or with COVID-19. because it is alleged that the virus is not as dangerous because supposedly only a few die directly from COVID-19. It has to be said that there are viruses that can be very deadly even if nobody dies from them. Only a small percentage of people die directly from AIDS, if at all. Since the virus affects the immune system, the sufferers are very susceptible to secondary infections, from which they eventually die. The value herd immunity shows how many people have to be immune to prevent the virus from spreading further. It is relatively easy to calculate from the infection rate. In COVID-19, an ill person infects about 3 people, but if 3 or 4 people are immune, 75%, then the virus can no longer spread statistically. You can either become immune if you have already survived the disease or if you get vaccinated. However, there is still no vaccination against COVID-19. There is vaccination for measles. If you assume an infection rate of 15, the herd immunity for measles is 93 to 94%. You can get vaccinated against measles. If 94% of the population is vaccinated, the other 6% are largely protected from measles. The doubling period specifies a number of time units after which the number of cases doubles with exponential growth. The exact formula is complicated. You can estimate this doubling period with a simple formula. If, for example, you have 10% more cases after a time unit, you divide 70 by this percentage and get the number of time units after which the number of cases will be doubled. In this example, 7. If the time unit was a day, so if on the first day 100, on the second day 110 infected had been confirmed, 200 people will be infected after 7 days. If it was 7% more after 1 day, you get a doubling period of 10 days. Sometimes you get sick without any symptoms. First, the symptoms are often relatively unspecific and are similar to those of a cold or flu. During this period, the throat is mainly affected. However, one symptom appears to occur in 80% of the cases and is relatively typical. You lose your sense of smell and taste for a certain time, 1 day or 2. If you notice this symptom, you are very likely to have COVID-19. In the so-called mild cases, the immune system then defeats the disease. If the immune system has not yet dealt with the disease by then, the viruses migrate into the lungs after a few days. Pneumonia is then triggered there. Then you will usually have to go to the hospital soon. Later the immune system can overreact, which can damage the alveoli as a side effect. In addition, bacterial infection of the lungs can occur. That is why preventive vaccination against pneumococcal bacteria is for sure being recommended for high-risk patients. Other organs may also be infected by the virus. Whether the virus causes the failure of other organs, such as kidney directly, or an overworked immune system is responsible for it, the sick people don't care about. After being infected with the virus, you get sick on average after 5 to 6 days. You can be infectious already after 3 to 4 days. Pneumonia starts after 9 to 10 days. After 10 to 13 days, the patient has to go to the hospital. After 12 to 14 days, lung failure sets in and you get to the ICU. The average length of hospital stay is 10 days. This information was determined in Chinese and German studies and is mentioned in the COVID-19 profile of the RKI, Robert-Koch-Institut. In order to become infected, the virus has to get into the body through the mouth, nose or eyes. There are different ways to get infected with the virus. The infection is similar to that of influenza or cold viruses. According to the virologist Dr. Drosten in the German Corona podcast, you can assume approximately this frequency of infection: 40 to 45% droplet infection, 40 to 45% aerosol infection, and 10 to 20% contact infection. When speaking, sneezing or coughing, droplets from the mouth and throat are released into the environment and hit the people or conversation partners standing next to them, possibly their lips or nose areas. If you prevent the droplets from escaping from the mouth into the environment, when sneezing or coughing, a lot is gained. You should sneeze or cough in the crook of your arm. A face mask also reduces droplet release when speaking. Furthermore, a larger distance between people is very helpful. Aerosol infection. Some droplets are so small that they remain in the air for some time. The smaller, the longer. The people in the room can breathe the virus. Over time, perhaps after a few minutes, the droplets dry out and the viruses die. In addition to the measures mentioned for the droplet infection, good ventilation of the room in which you meet helps a lot. This way, the aerosols in the room are diluted better so that high concentrations are avoided. Outdoor encounters are even better. Virus material that is on your hand can get on the surfaces when you touch door handles, grab bars in public transport, the computer keyboard or mouse or other objects, and may remain there for several hours. Shaking hands transfers the virus from one person to another very effectively. The people who touch such an object afterwards can become infected if they then touch their face with this hand. Touching contaminated objects is usually unavoidable. However, you should avoid touching your face with your hand afterwards. Sometimes this happens subconsciously. Therefore, psychological tricks are a good help. You can keep your hands in your pocket, put on gloves and other measures. This is only to outsmart your subconscious. If you have the opportunity to wash your hands with soap and water, you should. Hand disinfection never hurts. Shirt, phones, keyboards and computer mice should be disinfected. A large amount of virus material is analyzed in the stool. This virus material apparently gets into the stool from the throat when swallowing via the digestive tract. However, this virus material is no longer contagious. In contrast, the SARS virus was also contagious through the stool. The virus lives in the respiratory tract. COVID-19 is not transmitted via the blood. The AIDS and Ebola viruses, on the other hand, can spread very effectively by the blood. The WHO published its first report on January 5. It states that on December 31, 2019, the WHO office in China was informed about pneumonia of unknown origin in Wuhan. By January 3, 44 people were infected. The wet market in Wuhan, apparently being the source, was closed on New Year's Day. According to reports on the penultimate coronavirus MERS, on Ebola and measles, the next report on the new virus followed on 12th of January. After further brief reports, the first special daily situation report for COVID-19 was published on January the 21st. On January 7, 2020, scientists in China isolated a new species from the group of coronaviruses, which is blamed for the disease. On January 12, China released the gene sequence for the virus so that all countries could use it to develop diagnostic kits. The first foreign cases occurred on January 13th in Thailand, January 15th in Japan, and 20th in Korea. In total, until January 20th, 282 confirmed cases were reported, including 278 in China. Until that date, 6 people had died in Wuhan. On January 22nd, the first person-to-person transmission from COVID-19 in China were confirmed. On January 23, the WHO Emergency Committee could not yet agree to declare an international health emergency. That happened on January the 30th. On March 11th, COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. After China published the gene sequence for the virus on January 12th, tests could be developed. One detection method is the PCR method, polymerase chain reaction. Samples are taken from the throat, coughing or stool and subjected to various tests that indicate certain gene sequences of the virus. The test runs in 3 stages. The first stage determines whether the virus has a coronavirus gene. In 2 further stages, 2 further genes are tested that are characteristic of SARS-CoV-2. The virus can be precisely determined using genome analysis. Mutations also can be seen. However, this process is quite complex. Rapid tests have subsequently been developed. These, similar to a pregnancy test, indicate infection with the virus. However, the faster a method is, the less precise it is. The virus can also be detected indirectly in the blood using antibodies produced by the immune system. These include the lateral flow test or the ELISA test. Antibodies are formed when you become infected. They can also be detected for a longer time after the infection. At this point, I will save myself from explaining how the tests work. There are certain properties of the virus and antibody formation that need to be considered in these tests. After infection, the virus first affects the upper respiratory system. That is why it is easy to detect in the throat at the beginning. After a while, the virus migrates to the lower respiratory system and lungs. Smears from the throat can be negative, although the patient shows symptoms of illness. The virus is also easy to detect in stool. However, the virus particles are no longer infectious there. The immune system starts working with the infection. 2 types of antibodies are formed. One type of antibody is not detectable for a long time in the blood. A second variety, however, for several weeks or months. However, these will also become less and less detectable after this time. That doesn't mean that humans are no longer immune, because besides antibodies, the immune system has other weapons. These also serve as long-term memory, so to speak. These antibody tests have been developed since April 20. They can be used to prove whether people have already had an infection. Because of the often very mild or even unnoticed causes, more people have certainly been infected than are recording in the official statistics. So you can use the antibody test to estimate how big the dark figure is. However, other coronaviruses can also interact with this test, so that it indicates surviving the disease where there was none. However, now this should happen rather rarely, because the other coronaviruses are responsible for some colds and flu infections, preferably in the colder season. The development of the PCR test was the fastest. The antibody test was the next step. Here only the reliability has to be clarified, because with these tests you cannot harm anyone. However, it is more difficult to find drugs that can cure the disease, and it is even harder to develop vaccines against the virus, because it is no longer just about drugs and vaccines fighting the virus or protecting against infection. They must not harm people too. Therefore, experiments are first carried out on animals, then drugs or vaccines are tested on a few patients. The effectiveness must then be determined in clinical studies with a representative selection and number. Only then drugs or vaccines can be brought onto the market. The AIDS virus, HIV, for which there is still no vaccine, shows how difficult it is to develop vaccines. However, this is also hidden in human immune cells, and it is therefore difficult to fight against it. Optimistic estimates predict a drug in fall or winter 20 and a vaccine in spring 21. At least until then we have to deal with the virus. Is the virus a fake of the powerful? This question still has to be answered. How can you decide whether the virus is a fake of the powerful or not? In one of his videos, mathematician and game theorist Professor Christian Rieck showed that the results showed no difference between a fake and successful action. If the government has taken the right measures to fight the virus, whether deliberately or by chance, the result is the same as if the virus were just a fantasy. One of my subscribers, thank you Papa Frank, made me aware of a nice video by Samuel Eckert. In his video he shows, among other things, a graphic of the weekly deaths from Germany. I show this graphic here too. The data is really impressive, because you cannot see the pandemic at all in the deaths data. There have even been more deaths in winter in recent years, probably flu waves. And you can see a similar number of deaths from summer heat waves even in some years. So is everything just a fake and not as bad, just as Samuel Eckert claims in his video? Now we are at the point that Professor Rieck described exactly in his video. With this data we cannot distinguish whether the virus does not exist or whether the government has done everything correctly. Either you can stop at this point and say that everything is not as bad, this Samuel Eckert does, or you look at data from other countries, additionally, as Professor Rieck did recommend. We also don't find anything in Austria. An influence of Covid-19 cannot be seen. In the next countries, however, we see it. Belgium, Italy and Spain show a marked increase in weekly deaths, and the number of deaths in Sweden is also significantly higher than in the other years. The Euromomo site shows a number of deaths per week in some European countries, especially in the northwest and southwest Europe. I previously have spoken about COVID-19 mortality depending on age. In Euromomo's charts, there is no increase in the number of deaths among children in this year. The 15 to 44-year-old people, on the other hand, see an increase in the number of deaths from normally 1,100 to peak 1,500 per week. That is plus 36%. This increase is even more pronounced among older people. 45 to 64, 33%, 65 to 74, 46%, 75 to 84, 68%, 85 and older, 65%. Of course, nothing is said here about the cause of the deaths, but it seems unlikely that the number of car accidents or murders or heart failures has increased so dramatically. It is obvious from what has been said so far that we still have to live with the virus for a while and that we have to take appropriate measures to be able to control the disease caused by the virus. There are many of them. Some have to be ordered by the state, others can be made voluntarily by the citizens themselves. So far Germany has been quite successful in fighting the plague. Of course, there are disadvantages, because people see that everything is not as bad as it is painted on the wall. At that, they start to be dissatisfied with the restrictions. There's often talked also in the press and television about contact ban or curfew. This has never been a curfew in Germany. Everyone is allowed to go outside, be it for shopping or for walks or sports in the fresh air. Other countries have dealt with this much more rigorously and in some cases have imposed curfews. There are no contact blocks either. Even everyone is allowed to have contact with everyone, as long as the distance is not less than a security distance. Internet and telephone can of course be used as often as you want. Contact barriers may exist for felons or terrorists who are imprisoned. They are then also prohibited from using the internet or using cell phones. Limiting contacts and keeping a distance are the only measures normal people have to limit the influence of the disease. But it is a balancing on the knife edge. If no restrictions are imposed, many people and the health system will collapse. If too many restrictions are imposed, however, the economy goes down to the drain. The German economy is already in the most difficult situation since the end of the Second World War, and the German economy is quite well positioned. Many developing and emerging countries will no longer be able to serve the debts. There will be collapses of economies that can also affect the global financial system. How long will it take? The herd immunity mentioned above is reached when 75% of the people are immune. Since we do not yet have a vaccine, the only way to achieve this right now is to get the number of people this immunity from surviving the disease. In Germany, that is 60 million people. So far, today, almost 195,000 people have been infected in Germany, of which 176,000 have recovered. Assuming a certain number of unreported cases because a number of people have no or only minimal symptoms, more people are infected. If we make a very high guess, it may be 1 million people who have been ill in Germany in the past 4 months. The number is probably smaller, but this should be only seen as a calculation example. If you extrapolate this number to 1 year, there are 3 million a year, so it would take 20 years to achieve herd immunity. However, since we are now more careful with our contacts and with large public events, it takes much longer. And, however, no economy in the world can maintain strict lockdowns and contact restrictions for so long time. The only way mankind must go is to develop and test the vaccines as soon as possible. Perhaps the infection will go away on its own, as happened with the Spanish flu 100 years ago. Here in this figure you can see also the death rate in Great Britain caused by Spanish flu 100 years ago in 3 waves. At this point, I want to thank everyone who helps other people, be it in old people care and health care, in the provision of energy, water and food. In some cases, I work under difficult conditions, for example in hospitals, food business, or in maintaining security and order. Sometimes they do without vacation and weekends to develop drugs and vaccines as quickly as possible. Sometimes they cannot work as usual because they have to look after children in addition to work in the home office. In some cases, they lose work and housing because of the economy is down. Humanity as a whole has to go through this valley of tears. The way will still be a long one. After that, our life will partly be very different from before. Remain healthy and brave. Times are tough for everyone, for some more, for some less. Bye bye, and thank you for listening to this video.